She woke up before the sun that morning, as she did every day. The house was still dark, except for the faint light slipping through the curtains. Her room was small, just enough space for a bed, a dresser, and a narrow walkway. She took a deep breath and prepared herself for another long day. The mansion where she worked was enormous, filled with rooms she had to clean, silverware she had to polish, and floors she had to sweep until they gleamed. It was a beautiful place, but it was not her home, and she did not belong there. To the family and the guests, she was invisible. To them, she was just a maid. As she moved quietly through the hallways, carrying a tray of breakfast, she noticed the way the sun began to touch the marble floors. The mansion was quiet at this hour. The servants had their morning routines, but she liked these moments of stillness. She paused at the piano in the corner of the grand living room. It was polished and shiny, a masterpiece of craftsmanship. Her fingers itched, even though she knew she could not play here. Not yet, not while anyone might see. She had grown up with music. Her mother had a piano at home, and she spent hours every day practicing when she was a child. Music had always been her escape, a world where she felt free. Life had other plans for her, though. Her family could not afford to let her pursue her talent. She had to work to survive. The piano became a distant dream, hidden behind the walls of her reality. And now, here she was, working in the house of a man who owned so many things she could never dream of. Still, the piano called to her every day. A silent friend in a house full of strangers. She carried on with her work, cleaning, organizing, and making sure everything was perfect. The family would be awake soon, and the house had to be spotless before the guests arrived. She moved like a shadow, careful not to be noticed. Some people passed her with a smile or a nod, but most ignored her completely. It did not bother her. She had learned long ago that she was not expected to be seen. Her world was the one she created in her mind, filled with music and possibility. The day began like any other. She dusted the furniture, polished the silver, and arranged flowers. She worked efficiently, quietly humming a tune only she knew. The mansion slowly came alive with the sound of footsteps, laughter, and conversation. Guests began to arrive, their voices filling the rooms she had prepared. She moved among them, serving drinks and offering polite smiles. Some of them barely looked at her, assuming she was just another member of the staff. Others glanced at her, their eyes curious for a moment, before returning to their conversations. She had grown used to being overlooked. Despite her invisibility, she observed everything. She listened to the music that played from the piano during previous gatherings. She watched the way people reacted to performances, the way their faces lit up or turned in boredom. Music had always fascinated her, the way it could move people, the way it could tell stories without words. She longed to play, but she never let anyone see the depth of her desire. It was a secret she held close to her heart. As the day went on, she continued her work, moving from room to room. The guests admired the mansion, praising its beauty, its elegance, its grandeur. She smiled politely when she was spoken to, but mostly she stayed in the background. She was careful not to draw attention to herself. She knew the rules of the house, and she followed them without complaint. Life had taught her that sometimes survival meant being unseen, being quiet, being patient. During the afternoon, the young woman found a brief moment of solitude. She wandered into the music room, her fingers brushing lightly over the piano keys. She did not play, not yet. She simply let her hands rest on the keys, feeling the smoothness beneath her fingers. It was enough for now, a small connection to the world she had left behind. She imagined the notes, the melodies, the songs she could play if only she had the chance. Her heart ached with longing, but she smiled. Even in silence, the music was alive inside her. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. She turned to see the millionaire, the owner of the mansion, walking into the room. He was a tall man, dressed impeccably, his presence commanding attention. Most people feared him or admired him from a distance, but he noticed her. He stopped, his eyes studying her for a moment longer than usual. She lowered her gaze, pretending to be busy with her cleaning, but she felt the weight of his look. It was not mocking or dismissive. There was curiosity there, something she had not felt from anyone in a long time. He nodded slightly and moved on, leaving her with her thoughts. She exhaled slowly, feeling a mixture of relief and nervousness. Encounters like this were rare. Most people did not notice her at all, but the millionaire's attention, even brief, left a mark on her day. She returned to her work, her mind wandering to the melodies she wished she could play, the music that was always with her, even in silence. Evening approached, and the mansion prepared for the arrival of more guests. She worked quickly, making sure every detail was perfect. Candles were lit, silverware polished, and flowers arranged with care. The piano, gleaming in the corner, seemed to watch her as she moved. She took a deep breath and imagined herself playing it, letting the music flow through her. She imagined the notes filling the room, touching the hearts of those who listened. It was a beautiful daydream, one she cherished secretly, as the first guests arrived. She took her place quietly among the staff. The mansion was alive with laughter, conversation, and the clinking of glasses. She moved among the guests, her hands steady, her smile polite. She observed the way they interacted, the way they ignored her presence, assuming she was just another servant. But she did not mind. She had learned to find her own world, to live in a space where her dreams were alive, even if no one else could see them. Throughout the evening, she noticed a group of guests gathered near the piano. They spoke of music, praising famous musicians, discussing talent, and sharing opinions. She listened quietly, her heart beating faster. Every word they spoke was a reminder of the world she had left behind, a world of music and possibility. She longed to join them, to play, to show them what she could do, but she kept her distance. The rules of the house were clear. Her place was here, in the background, invisible. As the night progressed, she found brief moments to glance at the piano. Her fingers twitched, imagining the songs she could play. She remembered lessons from her childhood, melodies she had practiced countless times. Music had been her companion, her friend, her solace. Even in the midst of a house full of strangers, her music was alive inside her. It was a secret strength, a quiet defiance, a reminder that she was more than what people saw on the surface. The evening continued. It's filled with conversation, laughter, and the gentle hum of activity. She moved through the rooms with grace, careful not to draw attention. She served drinks, tidied up, and made sure everything was perfect. The guests praised the mansion, the arrangements, the atmosphere, but no one noticed her efforts. And that was fine. She did not need recognition. Her satisfaction came from her own sense of pride, from knowing she was capable, from holding on to the dreams that lived within her. As the night wore on, she found herself alone near the piano again. She placed her hands lightly on the keys, closing her eyes. She imagined the sound, the rhythm, the melody flowing from her fingertips. For a moment, the mansion faded away, and it was just her and the music. It was a private world, a sanctuary she had created for herself. She smiled, feeling a sense of peace. A connection to the life she had once dreamed of and still longed for. The millionaire passed by once more, pausing briefly to look at her. This time, there was no word, no gesture, just a long, quiet observation. She met his eyes for a moment, and something passed between them. A recognition, a curiosity, a sense that he saw more than what was visible on the surface. She quickly looked away, returning to her work, her heart racing. Encounters like this were rare, and she did not allow herself to dwell on them too long. But the memory lingered, a spark of possibility in a world that often felt limited. The night ended, and the guests departed, leaving the mansion quiet once more. She moved through the rooms, ensuring everything was in order. The piano stood in the corner, waiting, silent but alive. She ran her fingers over the keys, imagining the songs she could play, the melodies that filled her mind. Music had always been her world, her escape, her secret, and even as she returned to her small room, exhausted from the day, she held on to that world tightly. Before she slept, she sat at the edge of her bed, closing her eyes and imagining herself at the piano, playing for an audience that could not see her yet. She imagined the notes rising, the music filling the room, touching hearts, creating beauty. She imagined a future where her talent could be recognized, where she could be more than a maid, where she could be seen for who she truly was. And with that thought, she drifted into sleep. carrying her music into her dreams, ready to face another day. Invisible to the world, but alive in her own secret world of melody and possibility. The next morning, the young woman woke up before the sun once again. Her room was quiet, the faint light casting soft shadows across the walls. She took a deep breath, knowing another long day awaited her in the mansion. As she dressed in her simple uniform, she thought of the events of the previous day. The guests had praised the beauty of the house, unaware of the countless hours she had spent preparing everything. It was tiring work, but she had grown used to it. She had learned to find pride in small victories, in the knowledge that she had done her job well, even if no one noticed. She moved through the hallways silently, carrying a tray with fresh coffee and tea for the morning staff. The mansion was beginning to wake, servants bustling quietly as they prepared for the day. The sound of polished shoes on marble floors echoed softly, mixing with the distant hum of conversation. She liked these quiet moments when the house was not yet alive with the energy of the guests. It gave her a sense of calm, a chance to breathe before the chaos arrived. Today, a large gathering was expected. Some of the wealthiest and most influential people in the city would be arriving. The young woman knew the importance of her role, even if it was invisible. She moved quickly, tidying the rooms, arranging flowers, and making sure the silverware shone. She hummed softly to herself, a melody she had created long ago, letting it carry her through the work. The piano in the corner of the living room gleamed as always, a silent presence that seemed to watch her as she moved through the house as the first guests began to arrive. She positioned herself quietly among the other staff. She served drinks and offered polite smiles, careful not to draw attention. Some guests barely glanced at her, assuming she was just another member of the household staff. Others gave a polite nod, acknowledging her presence but not her talent. She had grown used to this treatment, learning to exist in the background, unseen and unremarkable. But inside, she held on to her dreams tightly. Imagining a day when her music would be heard and appreciated, the gathering started with laughter and conversation, the clinking of glasses and the soft murmur of voices. She moved gracefully among the guests, ensuring everything was perfect. Then, a conversation began near the piano. Several guests spoke of famous musicians, praising their skill and discussing music with animated gestures. Her heart tightened as she listened, memories of her childhood piano lessons flooding her mind. She longed to play, to let the music flow from her fingertips and fill the room. But she knew she could not yet, a young man. One of the guests laughed loudly and said, "I wonder if the maid could play something for us. It would be funny to hear her try." Laughter erupted from the group, mocking and lighthearted, but it stung. She kept her head down, moving away quietly, pretending not to hear. Her hands trembled slightly, not with fear, but with the desire to show them what she could do. She had faced mockery before, but this was different. This time, the desire to play, to prove herself, burned brighter than her fear of humiliation. The millionaire, standing nearby, noticed the exchange. He observed her quietly, his expression unreadable. Unlike the others, he did not laugh. He simply watched her, curious about the way she carried herself despite the jokes. There was something in her that caught his attention, a quiet strength, a grace that went unnoticed by the mocking guests. He did not intervene, but he made a mental note of her presence. Sensing that she was more than she appeared, as the afternoon wore on, the hired pianist, who was supposed to perform for the gathering, did not arrive. The guests began to murmur, their excitement fading into impatience. The atmosphere shifted, and the room felt tense. Someone finally suggested that the maid, the young woman who had been serving drinks and tidying the space, could perhaps fill in. The guests laughed again, thinking it was a joke, but the millionaire turned to her and asked gently, "Could you play for us?" She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The room fell silent, all eyes on her. She had never performed in front of an audience like this, especially not here. In a mansion full of people who had assumed she was invisible, her hands shook as she walked toward the piano. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that this was her chance to show who she truly was. She sat down on the bench, her fingers hovering above the keys, feeling the smooth surface beneath her touch. The room was quiet, the tension thick, but she focused on the music that lived inside her. She began to play. The first notes were soft, tentative, but they captured the attention of everyone in the room. The melody flowed from her hands, growing stronger, more confident, more expressive, with each passing moment. The guests who had mocked her earlier were silenced, their laughter fading into astonishment. The music filled the room, wrapping around each listener, touching hearts, stirring emotions that words could not convey. The young woman closed her eyes, letting the piano guide her, letting the music speak for her. As she played, memories of her childhood flooded back. She remembered the lessons she had taken, the hours of practice, the sacrifices she had made to keep her family fed and cared for. She remembered the dreams she had almost abandoned, the passion that had never left her. The music was not just sound. It was her story, her struggle, her hope. Her heart poured into each note. The room transformed, energy shifting from mockery and doubt to wonder and admiration. The millionaire watched closely, his expression unreadable, but his eyes filled with interest. He sensed the depth of her talent, the power of her emotions, the story hidden in her music. He realized that this young woman, whom everyone had ignored and underestimated, possessed a gift far beyond what they could see. Her playing was not just technically skilled, it was soulful, moving, and unforgettable. The other guests shifted in their seats, captivated, unable to look away from the music and the hands that brought it to life. When the final notes lingered in the air and the room fell silent, there was a moment of disbelief. The guests exchanged glances, some whispering, others simply staring. The young woman remained seated at the piano, her hands resting lightly on the keys, her breath steadying. She opened her eyes and looked around, seeing astonishment, admiration, and a hint of shame from those who had mocked her earlier. She felt a mix of relief and pride. Knowing she had shown them her truth, the millionaire stepped forward, applauding softly. "That was extraordinary," he said, his voice calm but filled with genuine admiration. The guests began to clap, some hesitant, some enthusiastic, but all acknowledging the talent they had underestimated. She smiled softly, bowing her head, her heart swelling with emotions she had long kept hidden. For the first time she was seen, truly seen, not as a maid, not as an invisible presence, but as a musician, a storyteller, a person with depth and talent. After the applause, she returned to her duties, but the atmosphere had changed. Guests who had ignored her now looked at her with respect, some with curiosity, others with awe. The young woman moved through the mansion with a quiet confidence she had never felt before. She had proven to herself, if not to everyone else, that her talent was real, powerful, and deserving of recognition. She had faced mockery, and through her music, she had transformed it into admiration. As the evening continued, she caught glimpses of the millionaire observing her from a distance. There was a thoughtful expression on his face, a recognition of something rare and extraordinary. She felt a sense of connection, knowing that someone had truly seen her, understood her, and appreciated the talent she had hidden for so long. It was a small spark, but it filled her with hope and determination. She knew that her journey was just beginning, that this moment was the first step toward a future where her music could be shared and celebrated. When the gathering ended and the guests departed, she stayed behind to tidy up, her hands moving with the ease and grace of someone who had found a new sense of purpose. The piano stood silently in the corner, its presence comforting, as if it had been waiting for this moment. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, feeling the connection between herself and the music, the bond that had sustained her through years of hardship. She knew that this was only the beginning, that her talent could no longer be hidden, and that her life was on the brink of change as she prepared to leave for the night. She paused by the piano, letting her hands rest on the keys one last time. She whispered a soft melody, a private song of gratitude, hope, and determination. The mansion was quiet, the lights dimmed, and the world outside seemed far away. She closed her eyes, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment and anticipation. The mockery of earlier had been transformed into a moment of triumph, and she knew that she would never again doubt the power of her music or the worth of her dreams. That night, As she lay in her small room, she reflected on the day. The laughter that had once threatened to humiliate her had been replaced by admiration and respect. The music that had lived silently inside her had finally been heard. She knew that challenges would still come, that not everyone would understand her, but she also knew that she had the strength, the talent, and the courage to face whatever lay ahead. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a symbol of her resilience, her passion, and her unyielding spirit. And as she drifted into sleep, she dreamed not just of music, but of the life she was determined to create, a life where she could be seen, heard, and valued for who she truly was. The day after her unexpected performance, the young woman awoke with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Her small room felt warmer somehow, as if the house itself knew that something had shifted. The previous evening's applause still lingered in her mind, a memory she could replay over and over. She dressed quickly and quietly, moving through the mansion before the other staff were awake, as she always did. The halls felt different today. They were the same polished corridors, the same high ceilings. But now she walked through them with a sense of purpose, a new awareness that she was seen, even if only by one person. The staff moved about, preparing for the day's work. She passed them with a quiet nod, feeling a small but growing confidence. Today the mansion would host another gathering, a smaller, more private event, but important nonetheless. She had learned to anticipate the needs of the household, to be ready for anything, and today was no different. She cleaned, polished, and arranged, her hands moving efficiently, her mind replaying the melody she had played the night before. The piano, standing in the music room, gleamed like a silent companion, waiting for her touch once again. As she moved through the rooms, she noticed subtle changes. Some of the staff looked at her differently, with a hint of curiosity or respect. Others, oblivious, continued their routines. She did not need recognition from everyone. The fact that her music had been heard, that it had moved even one person, was enough. She carried on, setting the tables, arranging the flowers, and ensuring that every detail of the mansion was perfect. Her mind, however, wandered back to the piano, to the feeling of the keys beneath her fingers, and the way music could speak where words could not. The guests began to arrive, their voices echoing through the grand halls. She moved quietly among them, serving drinks and offering polite smiles. The atmosphere was lighter than the night before, but there was a tension in the air. People were curious, some whispering about the previous evening's performance. The young woman could feel the anticipation building. Everyone had heard about the maid who had stunned the millionaire and the guests with her piano playing. Some were skeptical, others intrigued. But all eyes would be on her if she played again. During the gathering, a discussion about music arose near the piano. Several guests spoke animatedly, debating the skill of famous pianists and their techniques. Their words carried both admiration and condescension. She listened quietly, her fingers brushing against the edge of the piano, longing to play but holding back. The memories of her childhood lessons came flooding back. The countless hours she had spent practicing, and the sacrifices she had made to keep her family fed. Music had always been her sanctuary, her escape, and now it was becoming her voice. A guest, emboldened by curiosity and perhaps a touch of mischief, remarked, "I wonder if the maid can really play again. It was a lucky coincidence last night, wasn't it?" Laughter followed, light but mocking. She felt the sting of their doubt, but this time it was different. The fire inside her, the desire to prove herself, burned brighter than before. She walked to the piano, her heart pounding but steady, and sat down. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to her, a mixture of anticipation, doubt, and curiosity reflected on every face. She began to play. The first notes were soft, careful, as if testing the waters, but they quickly grew stronger and more confident. The melody flowed naturally, each note carrying her emotions, her story, her unspoken words. The guests leaned forward, their skepticism fading as they listened. Her music was not just a performance. It was an experience. It told of her struggles, her hopes, and her resilience. The room was transformed, filled with a quiet energy that demanded attention and respect as she played. She closed her eyes and let herself be carried by the music. The memories of her childhood, the sacrifices she had made, and the dreams she had almost abandoned filled every note. She played not for approval, not for applause, but because the music lived inside her and demanded expression. The audience was captivated, unable to look away, caught in the spell of her talent. The millionaire watched intently, a thoughtful expression on his face. He realized that her skill was not just natural ability, but also the result of years of dedication and passion. The performance ended with a lingering note, soft and delicate, hanging in the air as if refusing to fade. Silence followed, the room absorbing the weight of what had just occurred. Then slowly the applause began. It was hesitant at first, then grew in volume and intensity. The guests who had doubted her now looked at her with awe and respect. She allowed herself a small smile, a quiet acknowledgement of the journey she had taken to reach this moment. She had faced doubt and mockery and had emerged not just unscathed, but triumphant. After the applause, the millionaire approached her, his steps measured and deliberate. He spoke softly, his voice carrying a tone of genuine admiration. "Your playing is extraordinary. You have a gift that goes beyond skill. It is rare to find someone who can touch hearts with music the way you do." She felt a warmth spread through her, a recognition that her talent had been seen and appreciated. It was not just the applause or the admiration of the guests. It was the acknowledgement from someone who understood the depth of her ability and the journey that had brought her here. The young woman returned to her duties, her movements calm and precise. The atmosphere of the gathering had shifted, the energy now one of respect and curiosity. Guests who had ignored her before now sought her presence, asking about her background, her training, and the story behind her music. She answered politely, sharing bits of her journey without revealing everything. The millionaire's presence lingered in her mind, a reminder that someone had truly seen her, beyond the uniform, beyond the tasks, beyond the invisible role she had been assigned. Throughout the day, she found moments to sit at the piano, letting her fingers dance over the keys, experimenting with melodies, and exploring the depth of her talent. Each time she played, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The mansion, once just a place of work and obligation, was becoming a space where her dreams could take root. The music room was no longer just a room. It was a sanctuary, a place where her voice could be heard, even if only through the piano. As the evening approached, she moved quietly through the mansion, preparing for the next set of guests. Her confidence had grown, but she remained humble, aware that the path ahead would require patience and perseverance. The piano stood in the corner, polished and waiting, a constant reminder of the power she held within her hands. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, imagining the notes, the rhythm, and the melodies that could fill the rooms and touch the hearts of those who listened. The next gathering was more formal, with distinguished guests who had heard of her performance and were curious to see the young woman who had captured their attention. She moved among them with grace, serving drinks and attending to the details. But there was a subtle shift in how she was perceived. No longer invisible, she was now a presence to be acknowledged, a talent to be considered. The conversation often circled back to music, and she listened quietly, her mind alive with anticipation and ideas. Knowing that soon she would play again, when the moment came for her to sit at the piano once more, she did so with a quiet confidence. She did not hesitate, did not doubt. The first notes flowed smoothly, a testament to her skill, her practice, and her courage. The melody built, capturing the room's attention, and the guests listened, enraptured. Her playing told a story of hardship, resilience, and hope. Each note was infused with her emotions, her experiences, her dreams. The music moved people in a way that words never could. The young woman felt the profound power of her own voice through the piano. The performance ended, leaving the room in a hushed reverence. The guests were amazed, many exchanging whispers of admiration and awe. The young woman stood, her hands resting lightly on the keys, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. She had transformed doubt and mockery into admiration and respect. Her music had spoken, and it had been heard. She had taken the first steps toward a future where her talent could no longer be hidden. A future where her dreams and her reality were finally beginning to align. As the night ended and the guests departed, she stayed behind, moving quietly through the mansion, ensuring everything was in order. The piano remained, silent but alive, as if it had shared in the triumph of the day. She placed her hands on the keys, whispering a soft, private melody of gratitude and determination. The mansion, once just a place of work, had become a stage for her dreams, a space where her music could live and grow. Before going to her small room, she took a moment to reflect on what had happened. The young woman knew that challenges still lay ahead, that not everyone would understand or appreciate her talent. But she also knew that she had discovered something powerful within herself, something that could not be taken away. Her music was her voice, her identity, her strength. And as she lay down to rest, she dreamed not just of the melodies she would play, but of the life she could create, a life where she would no longer be invisible. A life where her talent and heart could shine brightly for all to see. The morning after her growing recognition, the young woman woke with a mix of nervous anticipation and quiet excitement. Her room felt small, but it no longer felt suffocating. The previous night's performance still resonated in her mind, a melody that gave her courage and hope. She dressed quickly, moving through the mansion before most of the staff were awake. Today, the air seemed different, charged with a sense of possibility. She knew that the events of the past days had changed something not just in the house, but in herself. She began her work as usual, moving quietly through the halls, polishing silver, arranging flowers, and tidying rooms. The mansion was alive with activity, but her thoughts were focused on the piano, on the music that had become the bridge between her past and present. She remembered her childhood lessons, the long hours spent practicing, and the sacrifices she had made to help her family. Music had always been a refuge, a safe place where her dreams could live, even when the world demanded otherwise. And now, for the first time, those dreams were being seen. If only by a few, the guests arrived as expected, a mixture of curiosity and anticipation in their eyes. Many had heard about the maid who had amazed everyone with her piano performance and were eager to see her again. The young woman moved quietly among them, serving drinks and attending to the details with practiced grace. She noticed the subtle changes in their behavior, the way some watched her more closely, the way others whispered in admiration, and the rare smiles of genuine respect. It was a new experience for her, being recognized not just as a servant, but as someone with extraordinary talent. During the gathering, a guest approached her with polite curiosity. "I heard you play last night. It was beautiful. Can you tell us more about your background?" The question caught her slightly off guard. She had always been private about her past, but something in the moment encouraged her to share. She took a deep breath, recalling her journey with care and humility. She spoke softly, recounting her childhood, the piano lessons, and the challenges her family had faced. She explained how circumstances had forced her to abandon her dreams and take work as a maid to support her family. Her voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the emotions that had been buried for so long. The guests listened intently, their expressions shifting from curiosity to admiration. The story revealed the depth of her character, her resilience, and the passion that had never left her. Some whispered to one another, expressing regret for having doubted her talent, while others looked at her with newfound respect. The millionaire stood nearby, watching silently, his eyes thoughtful. He had suspected there was more to her than met the eye, but hearing her story confirmed the extraordinary nature of her journey and the talent she possessed as she finished speaking. The room was silent for a moment, the weight of her story settling in. Then the millionaire stepped forward, his presence commanding attention without force. He spoke with sincerity, acknowledging not just her skill at the piano, but the strength, determination, and courage she had shown in the face of adversity. The words were simple but powerful, and they resonated deeply with everyone in the room. The young woman felt a warmth spread through her, a sense of validation and recognition that went far beyond the applause of previous evenings. Encouraged by the support, she sat at the piano once more. Her fingers hovered over the keys, but this time, the music carried more than technical skill. It carried her story, her emotions, and the experiences that had shaped her. She played with a depth and intensity that captivated the audience, weaving a narrative through every note, every chord, and every pause. The room was transformed, filled with an energy that was both intimate and profound. The guests listened in awe, unable to look away. Caught in the spell of her talent and the honesty of her music, the performance ended with a lingering note, soft yet powerful, filling the room with a sense of completion and understanding. The silence that followed was profound, as if the audience needed a moment to absorb what they had just experienced. Then, slowly applause began, growing in intensity as the guests recognized the depth of her gift. They had not only witnessed skillful playing, but had been touched by a human story, a journey of struggle, resilience, and triumph. The young woman felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing she had communicated something far greater than notes on a page. The millionaire approached her once again, this time with a visible smile. "Your talent is remarkable, but what impresses me even more is your courage and dedication. You have a story that moves people, and music that speaks from your heart." His words were sincere, and she felt a deep sense of connection. She realized that her music could be more than a personal refuge. It could be a way to touch lives, to inspire, and to create moments of beauty and understanding. Throughout the rest of the gathering, the atmosphere had changed. Guests who had once overlooked her now sought her attention, asking questions and showing genuine interest in her experiences. Some expressed regret for their previous judgments, while others were inspired by her story and performance. She responded with humility, grateful for their recognition, but aware that her journey was only beginning. The experience reinforced her belief in the power of music, the importance of perseverance, and the value of staying true to oneself even in the face of adversity. After the guests departed, she remained in the music room, reflecting on the day's events. The piano stood silently, yet it seemed alive, resonating with the emotion she had poured into her performance. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, experimenting with new melodies and revisiting old ones. Each note carried a memory, a feeling, and a connection to her past, present, and future. She understood that the piano was not just an instrument. It was a companion, a storyteller, and a bridge between her inner world and the lives of others. That night, she sat quietly in her small room, replaying the day's moments in her mind. She thought of the faces of the guests, the expressions of admiration and respect, and the sincere acknowledgement from the millionaire. She felt a sense of accomplishment and pride, tempered by humility. She had faced doubt, skepticism, and mockery, and through her music, she had transformed those experiences into something meaningful and beautiful. Her talent had not only been recognized, but had touched the hearts of those who had witnessed it. As she prepared for sleep, she reflected on the lessons she had learned. She understood that recognition and admiration were fleeting, but the strength and resilience she had cultivated would remain with her. Her music was a gift, a tool for expression and connection, and she was determined to use it wisely. She had begun to see a future where her dreams were possible, where her talent could flourish, and where she could inspire others through her story and her music. In the quiet of her room, she whispered a soft melody to herself, a private song of hope, gratitude, and determination. The notes carried her emotions, her reflections, and her aspirations, filling the space with a gentle but powerful energy. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had begun to claim her place in a world that had once ignored her. Her journey was far from over, but she had taken a significant step toward a life where her talent and heart could shine freely as she drifted into sleep. Her dreams were filled with music, opportunity, and possibility. She imagined herself playing in front of audiences who truly understood her, sharing her story through the universal language of melody. She dreamed of a life where she would no longer be invisible, where her presence and her talent would be acknowledged and celebrated. And in that quiet, private moment, she felt a profound sense of hope and determination, knowing that her music would continue to guide her, inspire others, and open doors to a future she had once only imagined. The young woman awoke early, as was her custom, but today there was a different feeling in the air. The mansion felt lighter somehow, as if it too understood that something remarkable had begun. She dressed quickly, her uniform neat and crisp, and moved through the silent halls with a sense of quiet purpose. The piano awaited her, gleaming in the corner of the music room. A symbol of her talent, her journey, the doors it was beginning to open. Her mind drifted back to the events of the past days, the mockery, the unexpected opportunity to play, the awe of the guests, and the recognition from the millionaire. Each memory brought a mixture of pride, gratitude, and determination. She had faced doubt and judgment, yet her music had spoken for her. She knew now that her journey was entering a new chapter, one that would challenge her, inspire her, and push her toward a future she had only dared to imagine in her dreams. The staff moved about with their morning routines, and she followed hers with grace and efficiency. The mansion was preparing for another event, a private gathering of influential guests who had heard of her extraordinary talent. She arranged flowers, polished silverware, and ensured every room was perfect. Her hands moved with confidence, her mind calm but alert. Aware that her music had become a bridge between her and a world that had previously ignored her, guests began arriving, their eyes full of curiosity and expectation. She served them quietly, her demeanor composed, but inside, a thrill of anticipation ran through her. Today would be different. Today, she was not just a maid. She was a musician whose story and talent had begun to leave an impression on everyone around her. The whispers about her skills had spread, and people were eager to witness her play. She felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement, knowing that this was her moment to continue sharing her gift. During the gathering, conversations naturally gravitated toward music. Some guests were cautious, unsure if the maid's talent could match the stories they had heard. Others were excited, eager to hear her play again. The young woman observed them quietly, feeling the weight of their curiosity and expectations. She knew that this was her chance to show not only her skill, but also the depth of her passion and dedication. With a calm breath, she made her way to the piano, sitting down at the bench. She let her fingers hover above the keys, feeling the familiar smoothness and the potential energy of the instrument. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, centering herself, and then began to play. The notes started gently, flowing like water, building gradually into a rich and expressive melody. The music was a reflection of her journey, the struggles, the sacrifices, the dreams, and the resilience that had carried her through the years. The guests listened intently, captivated by the emotion and precision in every note. The room transformed as the music filled it. People who had doubted her skill or overlooked her presence were now entranced, their faces showing awe and admiration. She played with a depth and feeling that went beyond technique, reaching into the hearts of those who listened. Every pause, every crescendo, and every delicate note told a story of perseverance and hope. The millionaire watched closely, his expression thoughtful, recognizing the rare combination of talent and spirit that she possessed as she continued to play. Memories of her childhood lessons, her sacrifices, and the quiet hours spent practicing alone filled her mind. The music became her voice, telling a story that words could not capture. The guests were silent, fully immersed in the experience, unable to look away or interrupt the spell she had woven. When the final note lingered and faded into stillness, there was a moment of profound silence, a collective acknowledgement of the power and beauty they had witnessed.